He shuffles through the scrap, unaware of my presence. I approached in a staggered manner, glancing upon his bare feet as he sifts through a dumpster, searching, seeking, finding. He laughs and converses with himself, looks into me, piercing the barrier that is between us, the ego with its posturing. Suddenly, it dawns on me underneath the moon glow that I am but a mortal man whose destiny is a tombstone. I too am searching. I too am seeking. I look at him and see myself. I too am finding. So first off, I just want to thank Elizabeth for giving me this opportunity to share a piece of myself through poetry. And I'll be sharing poems from my manuscript, Concrete Oracles. I've put it out countless times to get it published, and it's been rejected at least a dozen times. So, but if there's any consolation in it, Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind was rejected 38 times, so I'm not saying that I'm a Pulitzer Prize winner, but just putting it out there. Now for more poems. This is an extended version of The Outcast, the poem that I just recited. That could be me. Under a summer's full moon, a junkie stands in the alley, sifting through a dumpster. Unaware of my presence, I approached in a staggered manner, glancing upon his bare feet, in which he walks upon the pebbles of a cold concrete world. How did he get here, in this place of passing his time, brushing past the trash of a garbage can, searching tirelessly for something elusive, like making sense of the world? His long pirate beard, prickling hair, stands out on an island, staring at my glance. No eye contact. We don't want our books to be read. His is probably a horror story, while mine is a drama with an undertone of underdog. I walk by silently as a stranger who acts blind, but sees everything from the inside. That could be me, with fingertips searching for some form of relief. I wonder if he felt my world like how I felt his for a moment. It's 3 a.m, and I'm staggering down Wilson. I should be home. He should be home. What happened to his self-worth? A transient being wandering like wind unseen, trespassing with buried footsteps, blowing by the eyes of all who can't see. Except for mine, I can see. If only for a glance, that could be me. I've tasted addiction, the succulent release of forgetting, the incessant visits to invisibility. I've tasted what it's like to be vacant, a vagrant with warped speech, warped pockets, warped socks and joggers, a savage of perception, poisoned by the pleasure that brings prison, an outcast of questionable living, questioning existence as it festers like an infant's cries from the cradle. Addiction is the crippling force that contorts personal worth. That could be me, with sifting hands through a garbage can, standing alone in the broken dark, with sullen face reflecting a swollen heart, drifting as the summer's breeze, fading like the hopes and dreams of one day attaining rest. No more makeshift homes of corrugated cardboard with newspaper beds. That could be me. I pondered the plunge into a not-so-distant reality as I stumbled with mumbled disposition, stricken with the slight discomfort of emotional drifting into another's life. A man with glass jaw stands on the edge of a waterfall, stripped of belongings while longing for a world of sympathy, belonging to a world that has no time for sympathy. Everyone moving at supersonic speeds, can't wait for life to be over. It's time to slow down and breathe. My eyes are open, I can see. Within his soul lies divinity, a heavenly loneliness carved into his catatonic face, reflecting my own life with a glance. I slow down my footsteps under the street lamps, with no sounds around except the shuffling sound of loose papers and clinging of empty bottles. There, a human being, like a scavenging vulture, searches through the scrap. The shadows are out, the moon is full. I am headed home. Next up, I have a persona poem based on a true story, and it was published in Caravel Literary Arts Journal a couple years ago by Eric Allen Yankee, who's in the crowd tonight.
In the house.
I was 16. I awoke to see myself face buried in the asphalt of Montrose and Central Park. I was on my bike that night when I felt my life slammed to the ground as if I had fallen from a tightrope. My body convulsed. I saw the reaper flex his sickle, and I fell deep into the sounds of people passing, asking questions of my passing. My name is Angel Ponce. The pigs got me when I was 16. They shot me in the side of the head. My body started twisting and turning. My heart raced like a jackhammer. Foam oozed from my mouth and blood. My Puerto Rican blood soaked the cracks like a flood of the blacktop. Why did they do it? Well, I was playing games with the neighborhood gang on Cullum. I was no hoodlum. I just needed something more than an empty basement, so escaping to the pavement became a means to escaping loneliness. My mom was always gone. She was the breadwinner. She worked 2 jobs with no benefits. My stepdad flipped burgers at the Elston Diner and drank a case of Old Style every night. So while they were away, I would chill in the neighborhood, smoke some bud. I rolled a fat blunt with the Phyllis, kind of treasured it, put a big-ass smile on my face, gave me a sense of accomplishment like I had something to give the world. But coming from the gutter made me wonder if I could succeed at anything. The odds were definitely stacked against me. The dicks would roll down the block. Officer Burkowski jumps out the passenger side screaming, "Get your hands on the fucking hood, you pieces of shit! Spread them! Where's the weed at?" I had a dime bag on me, and as soon as 5-0 pulled up, I put it in a book of matches, right behind the matchsticks, and tossed it in the grass. Officer Burkowski's getting pissed. He starts frisking me, desperate to find something. He pads my arms, moving down to my pockets, putting his hands in my pockets until I squirmed. I couldn't help but laugh because he was all up on my shit. That really seemed to piss him off. "You think this is funny, huh? You think this shit is funny?" He then started squeezing my nuts, shaking them in the palm of his clutched hand. I was hunched over on the hood of the Crown Victoria, coughing and wheezing and coughing. My eyes started to tear up, but I just fought the tears off. I didn't want to look weak in front of the gang. These damn narcs take a little bit of weed too seriously. Later on that night, I took my red line out for a spin. Gonna stop at my boy's crib for his 19th B-Day party. I'm riding up Central Park near Drake Bowl, about to pass the alley, when a narco flying down the alley going 60 miles per hour slammed his Crown Victoria into me, sending me flying through the air like a bird with broken wings falling from its nest. I hit the concrete and heard thunder. I got up and started running away. I don't know why, but honestly, I was just scared. Flashbacks to earlier with Burkowski and the ball grab incident didn't seem to help. Instinctively, I gave a backward glance. And as soon as I turned my head backwards, pop, pop, 2 gunshots fired. One hit the side of my head, and I fell instantly to the street. Thoughts of my mother. The smell of her hair. The smell of the arroz con gandules and chuletas fritas she would cook up for us before she left for her second job. I thought of my sister, and her 2 kids, my little nephews, who I won't be able to tuck in at night. No more Saturday morning cartoons. They loved Spider-Man and his amazing friends. We used to run around our basement slinging webs. No more hide and seek. Thoughts of my family flooded my head like my blood flooded the crevices in the blacktop. I looked up for a moment, and it was Burkowski asking where the weed was at. This next poem is an autobiographical narrative poem that delves into concepts of self-worth, belonging, loneliness, gang culture, urban teenage conformity, peer pressure, and dreams, and ultimately having dreams, and pursuing those dreams amidst a culture of self-destruction. It's titled Days on Lawndale. Oh, those days on Lawndale, the summer sweet weed smell and 40-ounce behemoth breath left its mark upon me like a flame searing flesh. I was in the present moment more attentive than ever, now reflective upon feeling a certain fire of uncertainty, a vivid emptiness internally. Identity was an infant, like a restless spider weaving an endless web of discovery, and every day was different, discovering the hate and love in me, the teenage angst of city life, yet somehow I found a bliss, not in coins, but in pitching them under the sun scream on concrete, where teens crowded corners, pitching quarters. And there was pressure to conform to the image of the cobra, to weather the storm of youth and not slip into that swamp, to seek some sort of truth in finding out who you are and who you're not. Oh, Chicago, I remember walking up to Jensen in the middle of September, ready to play ball in brilliant weather, 80 degrees and counting, the court with its austere gleam, calling teens to play. We played ball that day in September without any thought to what we'd do next, caught up in the moment until we ran out of breath. I took a break to grab a drink and watched the dreamless drinking on a park bench. I was a question mark, consorting with exclamations, surrounded by dreamless drifters and street bums, hearing the distant sound of harmonica beats as the marijuana seeped into sewers of Seagrams. I grew up in this ageless, aimless teenage kingdom where void was the concept of authority, a kingdom of anarchy and ranting of strange minds. I saw the powerless feel empowered in the proclamation of gang signs, but I felt power on the court. And there was pressure to conform to their ways. Though insecure about myself, I never bit the bait, denying my desire to belong. My school days were lonely, like the loneliness of my disease, reaching with its forceps and yanking out self-esteem. Most classes I would cut to smoke a blunt in the cutlass, trying to regain a sense of composure. I fled to the neighborhood, drifting in the currents of Cullum, a place where teens found identity and self-worth in the image of the cobra. But where did I find my self-worth? I found it in my dream of playing ball, basketball at Jensen, soaked in September sweat, dribbling up and down the court as madmen looked on, eager to participate. I stuck the dagger in with a swish to end the game. Damn, I felt good about myself, forgetting my limitations in a blurring moment. I ran like how the river runs, free from diabetes consciousness, free from the label of being dysfunctional. I held the ball, smelling the dirt, the musk, the burnt roach weed smell from the fingertips of felons. I fell in love that day at Jensen. I fell in love with dreams. Come on, Matthew, you coming with us? I watched them that day after the game disperse from the park to hang out on Leland. About 10 of them, green eyes, green and black, Back bruises, tattoos, shaved heads, 40-ounce behemoth breath. Alone, I grabbed tight onto my dream and dribbled it home down Lawndale, watching the dreamless go into a restless night. Another narrative poem titled The Window Washer, about a window washer. There's a man who washes windows along Western Avenue. Seemingly irrational, he blurts stories about giant pythons circling his steps, latching on his flesh, choking every breath as blood spurts from his nostrils. His awkward stance resembles an avalanche of some sorts, disheveled by the devils he snorts. Entangled in the cobwebs of cobblestone, one of 3 million who call Chicago home. He works for a living, but only to feed his habit of alcohol and coke. He sleeps under the viaducts with the other addicts, those with skeleton skin, the lepers who've lost hope. There's a man who washes windows along Western Avenue, from sunup to sundown, with squeegee fresh pressed against glass. He sees a haunting image loudly conjuring shadows from his past. He's been a prisoner for years, held captive by that helpless hunger that pelts urges with no restraint, wishing for excursions, perhaps to a transcendent state. What keeps him going? He finds meaning in the washing. It's a cycle of blissful anguish. Clean the outdoor storefront windows, while the insides he can't touch. Wipe the stains from the outside window panes, while the insides remain full of gunk. He's a surface cleanser with squeegee in hand. Divested of self-esteem, to himself he's hardly a man. He washes for the fix, transient as it may be. He sees the world as he sees himself, in a flask, drunk and crazy. Walking up and down the street for pennies, at least he's working for a living. Blood dripping down his nose from all the snow he's been sniffing. Strolling along the sidewalk, talking to the summer heat. He notices stress cracks carved in windows. He stops to gaze inside and look, but turns from his reflection, realizing his days are but pages in a book. Years vanishing like his once youthful face, shards of glass cracking on his feet from a car's broken rear view mirror parked alongside the street. Bars line up like pillars across the windows of a church. He sees the bars in his own eyes and can't seem to escape. Been afraid for so long to try and change his fate. He hesitates to look deep inside, fearing what could be, that he's a prison to himself and can't seem to get free. There's a man who washes windows along Western Avenue with mechanical hands in a methodical motion, moving up and down like a seismograph. His life is an earthquake, rumbling, shattering the windows. An autobiographical poem about me, the barefoot poet. I am the barefoot poet from the barefoot city. I have laid languishing at the bottom of staircases, cluttered with litter, liquor bottles, and leaves, my tongue reaching out of my body like the spirit within, reaching for the eternal bliss of unknowing. I have drunk the nectar of nothingness while hoping to glimpse time, paralyzed like my body bonding with concrete. I am barefoot and broken, all for cheap forgetting. I am the barefoot poet from the barefoot city. I have laid upon odorless leaves and clouds of soberless unknowing, while knowing time is drifting, undressing my breath. The moment a poet is born in the rubble, wet leaves resting against bare feet. I have journeyed to dark places, the bottom of staircases, all for cheap forgetting. I have loved a man. Platonic chords, played tunes of remembrance. Why am I barefoot? I have loved a man, but never told him his habits were bad. The ground feels this burden. The cold concrete has no sympathy. I am barefoot, and I am a poet. Next, I have a short love poem to Chicago, and it was published alongside Elizabeth Harper in an anthology of Illinois' best emerging poets put out by Z Publishing. It's titled, Still I Love You. Oh, Chicago, how you drenched me in the hustle of your Newport breath and left me feeling shame like the bruised arms of a junkie. But still I love you. How you secluded me like a Bazooka Joe bubblegum wrapper in my pocket. Cold like the quarter. Freeze pop at the corner. Liquor store on Hamlin. But still I love you. Though your streets were paved in mud, I dug my roots into your blood and grew up tough like stockyards and Ogden's railroads. Passing time in summer with a glove, while other kids, they played with cannons. I fell in love with the simmer of the sun at the park, while my friends fell into your madness. But still I love you, not for what you took, but for what you gave me. A pen and an open mind. Narrative poem number 3, The Albatross of Albany Park, published in Dissident Voice. The albatross of Albany Park hovers above him as he stumbles in his tatters and mumbles while he travels, hiding like a terrapin haunted by his battles. He struggles to get a grip as he slips from one corner to the next, begging with hands outstretched in a silent, solitary utterance, a plea to be seen. But people flee in cower at the sight of him, holding tight the coins in their pockets like he holds tightly to his past. Evening settles as the sound of the sunset trembles. He walks aimlessly around in rags, haunted by an invisible world that follows, made manifest as the albatross hovering above him, pressing upon him like the finger of Beelzebub. The albatross of Albany Park shadows him as he strolls down Montrose, exiled from society, blinded by the sulfurous burn of memory. Born in Bosnia. As a teenager, he witnessed his father take up arms, resisting the Serb forces in Sarajevo. Soldiers came like skeletons in boots. Echoes of a greater Serbia rained from the lips of Milosevic. Soldiers came swamping Sarajevo with unpinned grenades stuck inside their throats, choking conscience like lungs full of dust debris from bombed concrete buildings. He couldn't take it and felt frazzled by the weight of his father's broken bones. So he escaped and fled as marching men came like wild dogs in ravenous pursuit of flesh. Exiled from his homeland, he wandered, venturing out into the unknown. Soon after, he immigrated to the USA. Settling in Chicago's Albany Park, he found odd jobs in warehouses, janitorial work on weekends, but he couldn't hold a job for long. The constant throbbing memory of men marching in missile garb, hounding every moment with resounding sound of rifle fire, as to freeze him like a bullet pinned in the barrel. Flashbacks of him holding his father, him leaving his father, the sulfurous burn of memory upon him, a seed planted in blood, becoming a grave in his lungs, soon blooming into thorns, wounding everything he touched. The albatross of Albany Park hovers above him as he stumbles in his tatters and mumbles while he travels, hiding like a terrapin haunted by his battles. The Drifter, a poem on friendship, and sometimes all it takes is just being present in someone's life to make a difference. I met a drifter in Chicago's Irving Park neighborhood. He slept at the local Salvation Army and spent most of his days at the library reading poetry. He loved Wilfred Owen, Emily Dickinson. He was a speed reader, and he would read a couple books every day, mostly fiction. Sherman Alexie's Reservation Blues was his favorite. He was a stranger until I smiled, opening the door to language, giving back to me what I gave him. I called him Chief. He was in his 50s, though appeared much older. The harshness of an unsheltered life took its toll upon his features. Yet he was full of youth inside, pockets full of candies and mints. We connected right away. Never judged each other on how we looked. We were real, unpretentious, like two children in a sandbox. He dressed unassumingly, second-hand clothes, but that's the thing I loved about him. He didn't hide behind his attire. No intention to impress. He wore a worn-out demeanor, yet he had something, though he had nothing. One summer day, I ventured off to the library, looking for him at the corner Carol desk. He wasn't there. I checked the fiction section. He wasn't there. Lastly, I took a gander through the poetry aisle, but no sight of him. Nowhere to be found. I asked the librarian if he had seen him. He told me Chief had passed out from heat stroke and was taken to the local hospital. I drove slowly, periodically glancing at a poem collection book on the passenger seat. It was Emily Dickinson. I came to a red light and opened the book, randomly landing on the poem, The Chariot. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Time stilled like gridlock. The summer wind blew through the roll-down window. I brushed the sweat from my forehead, contemplating life and death. We don't have a choice in when we die, but we do have a choice in how we live. So I made a choice that day, driving to the hospital. I made a choice to be a friend. Persona poem number 2, another poem about peer pressure and teenage urban turbulence. The mind is a trap. The mind is a trap like the mouth of a carnivorous plant. Sitting on top of Happy Day Liquor's roof on Montrose and Hamlin, hearing the sounds of the vibrant city, the pit bull bark and honking horn of the elote man, selling fresh pepinos and corn on the cob. I'm 18 years old, holding a 40 of Old English, sipping my face pale, almost jaundiced. The mind is a trap like the mouth of a carnivorous plant. I was jumped yesterday as I walked home from school. I was just a passerby, but somehow I showed disrespect. So 3 guys approached me and one grabbed me by the neck. He started choking me until I couldn't breathe. Feeling dim and hazy, soon I couldn't see. Luckily, he loosed his grip and I limped home. The mind is a trap, like the mouth of a carnivorous plant. The next day, I took a different route home. I walked down Lawrence to Lawndale and hung a left passing through Jensen Park, notorious for tension in the dark, but it was only 3 p.m. And there they stood like pillars in cement on the corner of Wilson. We made eye contact for a split second, and then I took off, splitting into a sprint, hopping fences, running through backyards, knocking down garbage cans as roadblocks, paving the way for my getaway as dogs barked, spreading echoes through gangways. The mind is a trap, like the mouth of a carnivorous plant. Sitting on top of Happy Day Liquor's roof on Montrose and Hamlin, holding the old E, hearing the sounds of the vibrant city, the Rottweiler's bark and honking horn of the elote man. I sit sipping my face pale with vengeance until my friend unzipped his school bag and pulled out a .45. No need to struggle to stay alive, just get a grip on this. I touched the steel handle, a rush pumped my blood, a high I've never felt, a surge like an electrical shock, shocked my ego with a lethal feeling as I fell in love with the evil power of the Glock. The mind longs for a master to master it. What you feed it becomes it. And I fed it to the dogs that day. Bums. We get the bums to buy us beer. Dust and sweaty bareback city bums whose breath infects, stretching across Montrose until my chest burns with disgust. They're a hapless bunch, you see, hanging onto their lives with a string. It's 90 degrees in the early 90s, and these homeless and forgotten men, wet with whiskey lips, live a life of lethargy, sipping sloth with a ripping cough, largely due to abuse of nicotine. The pleasures that they seek are really a masked depression that settles in and makes home in bones with booze controlling moods. At least these bums stay together, a sense of community instilled, rejecting the material world with all its taxes, rent, and bills. The occupation of a vagabond with holes in shoes to travel on, with bare backs and bellies thirsting, they thirst to tune out the world at every turn, turning tables, turning into human taverns, unstable patterns of self-decay, buried deep into the caverns where there's no light of day. Broken in many places, it's right across their faces, the dead weight of past mistakes, the dread of freedom that is enslavement. We get the bums to buy us beer, Chicago street bums who love to laugh with mouths attached, to a bottle of rum or Seagram's, who dress in rags and tourniquets, but whose humanity is heavenly, even with their cotton mouths and bourbon lips. They are human nonetheless, more so than you and me. They have no ego, it's been stripped by some storm of suffering. Bicycle Bob was a mess and a slob, but before his wife died, he was working 2 jobs. No kids, just bills, no thrills or fun, just sweat and toil under the sun. Until one day, his wife came to say, I have a tumor that's growing and not going away. The hammering silence of a shattering violence that severs the bond of man and his God. The long winter came. Bob fainted into grief, soaking himself in sleep, only to awaken chains that baked his brain, a victim of disbelief. We get the bums to buy us beer, Chicago street bums who linger and wander and bother each other like sister and brother, fighting and bickering, stumbling and fidgeting, withering away. They are the picture that's worth 1,000 words. They are the nakedness that we hide. So these next 4 poems are about my best friend Andy, who unfortunately passed in 2011. And these poems are a poetic commemoration to him and our friendship with each other. A mare's imperfect reflection. Seeing you in that casket was like seeing myself. You were worn out at 30 years of age, torn apart by a world of humiliation. Every day you dealt with a black hole, steep, deeper than roots, the heartbeat of your youth. For so long we had shared the disembodiment that comes with youth. For so long we were young, running around the city, lunging into the leisure of weed smoke, wavering from the monotony of adult life. Our struggle was the bond that brought us together, sealing us as brothers, peeling the layers of pretension like the sunlit skin humans bathe in. We met in the 7th grade, and then I was hospitalized. I was alone in a room with doctors and nurses pricking my skin, while you were alone in a dungeon you called home. 2 weeks later, when I was released and ready to go back to school, you greeted me on the playground with your John Lennon black mop head hairstyle and crinkled Coke bottle glasses. I never felt judgment, only acceptance from you. We were different and we knew it. The pigskin we threw it in the play lot of a new season. The abruptness of dead things coming to life, swallowed in an exchange for youthful exuberance. A time for forgetting and turning the page. You and I had this ethereal bond that formed in our adolescence, drawn to each other by some sort of light like fluorescence, connected through an outside force to form a friendship. We were equals. We were brothers. I remember your emotions spilling when you talked about your father and how he abandoned you at the hospital the day you were born. Looking into your eyes, I could see even at the tender age of 15, the strain and shame you felt. It wasn't your fault. Seeing you in that casket was like seeing myself, a mare's imperfect reflection. I touched your face, the face that lit your mother's face with smiles. I touched your hands, hands that braced for the teenage joy of hopping turnstiles. I touched your heart, the soul of you, the sacred place of which the door was opened only for a chosen few. And I was one. Skipping rocks by the Wilson riverbank, sipping St. Ides malt liquor, talking about the courage it takes to survive with gaping holes inside, the holes of abandonment. Mine, the holes of lost health. Yours, abandonment of a father. So we were both tied down to the ground of dealing with the same monster. Two voyagers searching for paradise. Two aimless teens trapped in fear-filled nights of lost identities and imaginary plights. You talked about the future and how you lacked ambition. I felt the same qualms about facing my anxiety. So we were together in sedating our feelings of marginalization from society. Seeing you in that casket was like seeing myself. The day you took your life, a part of me was taken with you, and a part of you was left with me. When we were young, we both dreamed of the tree of life, finding paradise. So in our youth, we searched and searched and searched, unwitting of the paradise we had found in each other. How I miss you, for Andres. I wandered through your yard pretending you were still alive. I knelt down to your basement window, knocking as to awaken you from slumber. I knocked again. No one answered. So I stood there, leaning back to brick, my body caught between a ghost and a gangway. I stood frozen, broken by memories of us late nights stumbling down Wilson. How I wished you were here to see what I created. The joy of heaven on earth. My children would have called you uncle. A sage of the Krylon can. A mystic of the mural. How I miss you. The language. The conversations. The dreams we shared, the death we spurned at every turn around the corner, the bicycle pedals that burned down Cullum and raced to Eastwood, where nights felt like days and my heart was full. How I miss you. This next poem occurred to me while I was meandering through Andy's old neighborhood in Lincoln Square, near the Brown Line stop on Western, and I just happened to bump into his mom, and this poem was spawned from that moment. Right after that moment, I went to the Sulzer Public Library and began to pen this poem. I saw your mom today. I saw your mom today, walking slowly down Eastwood with a cane. I looked up and saw the rumbling passing train that sped like your life to a screeching halt. We exchanged hugs, embracing each other. She's traveled a long way, alone, without you by her side. The look in her eyes tells me you're still alive. We reminisce for a while, sun beating down on us like the loss we feel, as we feel the bond between mother and son, refilling my cup with memories. I tell her I love her and hug her, eyes welling up, about to gush like a geyser, deep crying into deep. I tell her I could have done more. The guilt doesn't seem to surprise her. She feels the same sentiment and begins to shuffle through her purse, digging in to grab her phone. She shows me an old video of you from New Year's Eve. You were waving your arms, jamming to Bob Marley. I see your smile, your laugh, your wacky ja-ja dance. She holds tight onto the phone, like she holds tight onto your memory. It's just the two of us, standing on the sidewalk, talking, weeping, remembering. A few villanelles. This first one is on Eric Gardner. who was killed by the NYPD back in 2016. And it's titled, He Whispered for Water. A man bleeds for mercy at the hands of fire. A humble plea ascends from the concrete. He whispered for water, but was tossed on the pyre. The tax collectors came, rabid and wired like rats raging through the neighborhood street. A man bleeds for mercy at the hands of fire. Eric gasped with desert lungs that tired from the choking of a breathless summer heat. He whispered for water, but was tossed on the pyre. The cry went up, but could not reach higher than the hollow hearts of those cops on the beat. A man bleeds for mercy at the hands of fire. I can't breathe, he wheezed as his life expired. Struck down to the earth, he fell to his feet. He whispered for water, but was tossed on the pyre. To breathe and live was Eric's last desire, but the flames did not shrink or cease to shriek. A man bleeds for mercy at the hands of fire. He whispered for water, but was tossed on the pyre. Another Villanelle poem, An Unreal Farewell on the Bombing of Hiroshima. A flash struck the morning and the city fell. All was ghost in the twinkling of an eye. The fire sunk into earth like flames from hell. The little boy blood bomb burst from its shell and quaked the world below and whirled up high. A flash struck the morning and the city fell. Bones laid soaked in the black rain's horrid smell as the devil descended from the sky. The fire sunk into earth like flames from hell. A vaporous fog crawled into lungs unquelled and bodies flooded the river nearby. A flash struck the morning and the city fell. The ground now lies in gore where zombies dwell as 1,000 melting suns flowed by. The fire sunk into earth like flames from hell. It all seemed a dream, an unreal farewell, as 130,000 died. A flash struck the morning and the city fell. The fire sunk into earth like flames from hell. This last Villanelle poem is from Philando Castile, who was also killed outside St. Paul, Minnesota suburb back in the summer of 2016. It's titled, 7 Times Gunshots Rang. The end came sudden and without remorse. Panic soaked the hand that held the guns near. 7 times gunshots rang with deadly force. A child in back seat meant nothing, of course. A mother's scream for help no one can hear. The end came sudden and without remorse. Fear is language spoken without discourse, the grip of the grave that sprays through the air. 7 times gunshots rang with deadly force. Philando lay powerless like a corpse, each breath a gasp for life as death loomed near. The end came sudden and without remorse. Nothing can save him, there is no recourse. Only blood flow to make life disappear. 7 times gunshots rang with deadly force. Put down like an animal, a sick horse. The hunter's mind made when he saw the deer. The end came sudden and without remorse. 7 times gunshots rang with deadly force. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to Matthew Lawler. We're gonna keep going with the open mic. We've got several people coming up, but I'm just gonna take a moment, and I won't do it justice, but I'd like to talk about how special that was. And again, I'm not gonna do it justice, but I mean, I heard all sorts of interesting turns of phrase and interesting things that Matthew was doing with rhyme and all sorts of topics that he was touching on that were socially and locally important. So I hope you appreciate that. I very much appreciate you coming and being our feature. And thank you.